Jeenie, 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 Beanie, Chadariya. Jeenie, 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 Beanie, Chadariya. Jeenie, Jeenie, Beanie, Beanie, Chadariya. Jeenie, 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 Beanie, Chadariya. Jeenie, Jeenie, Jeenie. काहे का ताना काहे को भरनी भरनी काहे का ताना काहे को भरनी कौन तार से कौन तार से बीनी चदरिया जीनी 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 बीनी चदरिया जीनी 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 हिंगला पिंगला ताना भरनी भरनी हिंगला पिंगला ताना भरनी सुख मन तार से सुख मन तार से बीनी चदरिया जीनी 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 बीनी चदरिया जीनी 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 बीनी चदरिया आठ कवला दाला चरखा डोले डोले आठ कवला दाला चरखा डोले पांच तत्व गुण तीन पांच तत्व गुण तीन बीनी चदरिया जीनी 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 बीनी चदरिया जीनी जीनी जीनी.
The third edition of LILA Bearing Witness. As many of you know, Bearing Witness is the cultural platform of LILA. I am actually today following a script because we have a lot of interweaving of many things. So just to keep time, I'm following a script. Our interest in Bearing Witness is to see the interconnections among various artistic expressions and facilitate dialogue between art and various other facets of life. We seek to know how, beyond its aesthetic, art bears witness to the times, our society, culture, and politics. For the same reason, if you look at our events, they're all very multidynamic, interdisciplinary, intercultural. This evening, we are inviting you to partake in a special journey with a few artist friends. We have with us Priya Ravish Mehra, artist and weaver, whose work we find immensely significant to our societies. It is around her work that we have designed this evening tonight. And we have Yoshiko Wada, renowned Japanese textile artist, curator, filmmaker, and educator. We have Meenakshi Thakur, singer, poet, and books editor, and the youngest among us, Parashmani Datta, a performance and theatre artist and student. This evening, we hope to open up a meaningful conversation among these different fields of creative expression, while trying to unravel the curious artistic work of Priya Ravish Mehra. Born in a town of Rafugars, Danas, she studied weaving at Shantiniketan and later went on a double scholarship, a Commonwealth grant and a Charles Wallace Fellowship to study in the UK. A while later, while she was fighting cancer, she rediscovered the aesthetic in relation to the livelihood art of her own small town, Najibabad. Rafugari. This town is famous for Rafugari. We have some Rafugars here today attending this program. The invisible art, Rafugari, invisible art of an invisible people, that's what we are now understanding it as. Nobody wants, I say this because nobody wants to acknowledge the Danas' presence. If you look at it, the Danas are present everywhere. You know, in the big brands, the factories, Danas are present everywhere, but nobody would want to acknowledge their presence, because acknowledging their presence means there's some imperfection with your cloth. So these people are invisible, and their art is invisible. The fineness of Rafuga's work is shown when he becomes absolutely invisible. But in Priya's case, while she was fighting this illness, this became very important for her, that she understood that beauty lies not in hiding, but in revealing. Because there are a lot of factors that go into your healing, invisible factors, so it became important for her that she revealed, acknowledged the presences which mended things, healed things. And in the process she draws our attention to people whose work defies our ordinary vision. And we are happy that we have Nadeem and Indigav here. Nadeem and Indigav are here with other Rafuga friends. They come all the way to be part of this program. And Priya's doctors and healers are also supposed to be here. Like yes. So this is actually a coming together of various people from various walks of life to bear witness to the fact that mending and healing are among the main functions of our art, literature, music, and dance. I thank all of you for being here, making this communion and this community experience possible. I'd like to begin this conversation by asking Priya about, we will go chronologically because that will give you a feeling how this whole journey began and where she is now. So we'll begin with, I'll ask Priya I would like to ask you about your Shantiniketan period. In the 80s, early 80s, you went to Shantiniketan. You were a postgraduate in mathematics. And it was quite unusual for somebody like that to go to Shantiniketan, and also it's not art, other kind of fashionable things, but she studied weaving there, and it was very difficult for her also because there was nobody to instruct her, so she had to kind of go find her own instructors, etc. So could you tell us a little bit about that time and how you got into it? What made you go to Shantiniketan to study weaving? How important was this for you?
Yeah, it's always happens in always you want to do something different from your parents, so it was kind of a way to take mathematics. So because of my both the parents had studied in Shantiniketan, and they were artists, so I wanted to do something different from them. And eventually I ended up in Shantiniketan. But for me, textiles were very much part of our life because we grew up with textiles from childhood, me and my brother, because my parents, both parents, my father wore always white khadar cloth. From the very beginning, we knew about different textiles, and it was always a curiosity to know where they belonged to and how they were made and all that. So when I went to Shantiniketan, I had a choice to take up there were different departments, but somehow loom was something which really fascinated me when I saw people sitting and weaving on the loom. And I chose to take textiles as a part of the fine art subject there. And I just carried on working with textiles in different ways, and that actually was the beginning of a textile journey for me.
But could you tell us a little bit about Shantiniketan and how Shantiniketan influenced?
Shantiniketan actually, because I was brought up in an environment where we lived a life which was a very simple life with natural surroundings which we always appreciated. So when I went to Shantiniketan, it was a similar kind of environment I found there, and it was almost like ducks taking to the waters. And the whole thing about the kind of training which probably my parents had, it also came subconsciously to us as children, was that things to do with hand and handicraft were part of life and our living. It was not something, a piece of decoration for us or something like that. So anything that was part of the Shantiniketan training. So there was nothing that it was part of life, and that was the art of life, I must say.
This is very curious because when we were this is a long journey that we've been kind of taking with Priya. While we were discussing, most of the time we end up at Priya's place, with a beautiful house in Maroli. In the pretext of rehearsing, planning, etc., etc., it's a very beautiful place. So once we were discussing this, and this happened, this whole thing of how this event, I would like to talk a bit about how this event came together, so that you can all participate in this process. So we were sitting there discussing this, and then one of our seniors at Shantiniketan, she is now in New Mexico, Sudeshna Sengupta. She happened to be there visiting Priya, and while we were discussing this, she became part of this discussion, and she said, this reminds me of Tagore poem. This is Tagore's own handwriting, and this is the poem, and she herself recited the poem and said she couldn't come here today because she is elsewhere, but she sent me the poem. In Bangla, she recited it and also did a translation and sent it. We can just listen to that extract.
মানুষের যে মাহাত্ম্য সে প্রভাতের আলোর মতো, তার যে দিগন্ত সে সামনে সে দূরে। মানুষের যে জীবনযাত্রা বর্তমান জীবনকে সে অতিক্রম করে, অজানা অধিকারীদের জন্য তার সঞ্চয়। সে শস্য চাষ করে যার জন্যে সে এখনো ফসল কাটতে আসেনি, সে আপনাকে উৎসর্গ করবে ভাবী কালের কাছে। যে প্রেরণা তাকে চালনা করবে সে ক্ষুধা তৃপ্তির প্রেরণা নয়, সে মহৎ প্রত্যাশার প্রেরণা। মহত্তম মানুষ উত্তর পুরুষের জন্য অর্ঘ্য বহন করেন, আনেন জীবনের বার্তা। তারা বাস করেন অনাগতে, সেই অনাগতকে প্রস্তুত করেন সকলের জন্যে। যে জীবনকে তারা ব্যক্ত করেন সে জীবন দুঃখ থেকে মুক্ত নয়। দুঃখ সেখানে সৃষ্টির আগুন। The greatness of mankind is like the light of dawn. Its horizon can stretch from up close to the far distance. The journey of greatness that transcends the immediate saves its gift for the unknown inheritors to come. They sow the seeds for those who have not yet arrived to reap its harvest. They dedicate themselves to the future. The inspiration that guides them is not triggered by the day-to-day need to satisfy hunger, but such inspirations come in anticipation of greatness for mankind. Their magnanimity bears the offerings for those who are yet to inherit the future. They carry with them tidings of life. They live in a time that's ahead of us, still unattained and yet to come. They prepare that future space for everyone else. They give meaning to life that is not free from suffering. The pain is there to ignite the flame for new creations.
We thank Sudeshna for this recital. While we are talking about humankind and the entire humanity and how your little act is not just limited to your locale, but it relates to the entire humanity. We would talk about Priya's going abroad after this period, going to the UK to study. Could you tell us, how this was different? That experience was different from your Shantiniketan experience, or because till the time you have this kind of forging of your artistic self, self-expression, that kind of thing. So now you're going out to another country to look at other traditions. So how did you relate to it? What was the experience like?
Shantiniketan was kind of exploring on myself, with my own kind of interest, because we didn't have actually teachers to teach us things. So it was kind of a self-discovery of many things. But later I had an opportunity to work on a project for 5 years, which was documenting the saris, the sari tradition, and it was in Bihar and Gujarat. I'm traveling from many villages and small towns, and I think that was a kind of a real learning experience to see how many different kinds of textiles existed in our own country. The idea of going abroad was to learn something which probably I would not been able to study in India, which was a tapestry tradition, because one of my teachers actually is here. I attended his workshop in Peter Harris. He had come to Shantiniketan and he did a 2-day workshop about tapestry weaving, and I was very fascinated to learn a very direct process of working on the loom. And that actually gave me this idea of going abroad to study tapestries. But when I went abroad, it was the first time out of the country at the age of 31, and I had no idea that it is not like India where you don't find handloom weavers in the country, because for me it was in abundance in our own country. So I think this whole perspective of looking at things also changed for me, because there were some studio weavers there, and very few in number, and suddenly I realized that the whole importance of the weavers in our own country and how valuable they are for of culturally in cultural context. And this whole tapestry tradition which was there, I had the opportunity to be in two colleges at the same time. One was for the technique, which was Westdean, to learn the French techniques, and Royal College was more of a conceptual kind of a thing, so it was very complementary to each other. And it gave a different way of looking at things. So all those works are from that period where I started kind of being more innovative with my own way, learning those different techniques which I learned.
So you were fusing, trying to fuse.
Yeah, it was kind of also I tried to adapt to our Indian looms with the same kind of a concept and the way or the approach what was in the West. So I used our Indian looms to work and weave few pieces at a time.
We are actually showing some of these picture images here, which as we talk about the various periods and various work that Priya was doing, we are also showing that the works from those that time. Priya, even as we talk about your how you were really working at the time, there's also something else happening in your personal life. I find that during this period, once you come back, and that period, towards the end of that period, you find that in Priya's work there is a certain kind of peaking of this particular sensibility. Like you've kind of understood your artistic self. So there are images like, actually, if we can go to the next one. She's more concerned about time, like passage of time. She does works like the full moon, etc. So there's the concern with time, the concern with the other, trying to understand the other, because that's the time when she got married, and she. How do you look at
coming back, actually, it was also looking at life in a different way, because I was brought up in an environment which was completely different than in an environment where I got married. So we had never seen those rituals being followed in the house. But when I got married, I saw my mother-in-law following certain rituals on particular day and month and the year, which was very fascinating for me. And suddenly this whole thing about what is a full moon and what is a black night, and how it kind of how people relate to it became such an important thing, and this whole rhythm and this changing of the seasons all became very much part of my new way of discovering a new home and new life.
But you also find after this, we find that Priya is kind of going into some kind of silence, like you don't see her working. All this training that she's got, she's suddenly stopping, and then there is a gap. At that time, she was also doing research on refugers. Suddenly, refugers became important to her, so she went back to her own place to understand. That is the time when Yoshiko and Priya met, and this whole thing about textile research and the scholarship around that. So I would like to ask Yoshiko about how you met and what is the connection.
It was year 2000. There was the first Sutra conference at Calcutta. That was a textile conference, mostly historical textiles and trade textiles. And I met Priya because I wanted to go to Shantiniketan and she was going. So we shared the train ride and we shared our interest, and I told her about my research on Boro, K-O-R-O, which is, there's one piece here. Mostly in Japan, it will be in indigo blue. shades of blue, because those were made by common people for everyday wear, and they were repaired, they were mended. And the interesting thing is that they were made of mostly used cotton, because cotton, which is abundant in India, was not abundant in Japan. It was not indigenous fiber. It came and established as a crop around 17th century, 18th century. So common people wore mostly bast fiber, bast meaning hemp, wisteria, mulberry, linden. Those tree bark fibers were cold to wear. It's very cold. So when they were able to get hand on these newly developed cotton fiber, which were established in warmer regions in Japan, only wealthy people could wear it. So the colder region, rural areas, people would buy used rags. So there's this huge, this was around 17th, 18th century, quite recent, that rag trade was established based on this new availability of cotton. But by the time these cotton fabrics came to the colder rural regions, they were already worn and very weak. So they had to either pair it and make yarn and weave as a rag weave, or they would stitch them, layer them, and strengthen them to wear them for winter clothes, because that was the warmth that warm fiber that they could get. Anyway, so I told Priya about that, and Priya said, oh, my grandfather's village, it's Najimabad, is the village, a town of Fugas. And I was so excited to hear that. He said, Priya, please research this, because I'm writing a book on books to include this research. Because I'm finding that this kind of tradition in different forms are found all over the world, of course, but manifest in a very different ways. And to hear about the darning which is elevated to an imperfection, to work on this very superb, amazing Kashmiri shawls was a totally opposite end of what Japanese Boro was about, because these are plebeian, utilitarian people who didn't have much or made them. So that's how we got to connect. And she started sending me information. She's been presenting papers in different parts of the world. And also I learned of her illness. And we have been sharing a lot of these challenges, yes, but a wonderful process.
Yes, it's amazing, like how, like, you know, we all get into this kind of depression sometimes, and somebody comes and, like Priya always says that it's Yoshiko who actually kind of took her out of this thing and made her work on this whole project. And she's deeply into this research now. While we talk about that, you know, it's also incredible the way this whole thing came together, this program. And Meenakshi and Parash were rehearsing the Kabir song and the dance, but while we were doing this, and when we talked about this communion, suddenly Meenakshi is also a very fine poet. So she said, okay, let me, now we're talking about silence and how the other can actually, you know, kind of draw you out of the silence and make the connect. So Meenakshi said, let me just write a poem for this occasion, and Parash kind of choreographed a piece. So now they will present that. It's Meenakshi's own poem and Parash's.
no.
Why are you so silent? Come, let me weave you a poem. It will stay with you like a friend and protect you from the wild winds. With silver threads from the moon and stars on the loom of this quiet night, let me weave you a poem. Let me weave you a poem, using words that travel on air from one town to another, crossing love and hatred, gathering patches that make up our lives. Why are you so silent? Come, let me weave you a poem. Let me stitch together the warp and weft and darn your imperfect cloth with the tragedies and carnivals that have passed us by. Let me mend your memories that are torn and lie forgotten in disrepair. Why are you so silent when we have a history so beautiful and intricate we could just heal with nostalgia? We could come back together and start all over again. Come, hold my hand and sit by the loom, bareness trembling on your delicate lips. Tonight, I shall weave you a poem and you will find a voice again.
Now we'll go back to Priya to listen her part of the story, like what Yoshika said, like how did you get, tell us a little more about your research and this whole scholarship on graffiti.
It was many years I have been involved with the textile, but somehow going back to my hometown and was again coming like a full cycle, because when Yoshiko mentioned about documenting, I was wondering what will I write. So she said, whatever your story you told me in your train journey, why you just don't write that? And that actually culminated into the paper which was presented in Auckland. And it was quite interesting because as children we had always seen rafugas coming to our house with bundles of lots of textiles to be shown to my parents. Sometimes it was to identify because they had knowledge of various textiles, but when the textiles came for repair, it was kind of sharing the joy of bringing some very beautiful textile. So we had seen lots of textiles from childhood, and we knew about rafugas. But we always also appreciated the beauty of those textiles, but we had never gone beyond that. Rafugas were like, so going back again was kind of a tribute to what all I had learned about textiles, and this whole introduction to this world was due to this wonderful experience I had as a child. So once I started researching, the story just started unfolding, because so many things which was just taken for granted, it started revealing. And it was very generous of the rafugas to share all those stories with me, which were actually their trade secrets. And it was just being, I think, the daughter of the town. They were very kind of sharing. And it actually was, gradually the story started really expanding, and more things started coming out of that Pandora box. And it was a very beautiful experience to know that what we thought as a very perfect cloth actually was full of repairs. And if you see these two shawls which are part of my collection, that was given by my mother as a wedding gift to me, which had been made from two pallas joined together, as one piece. Well, this is this one palla of a shawl, which has two pallas have been joined in a different way. And so whatever actually remained from the old pieces were recomposed every time a shawl came for repair or it was in rags. And the whole, there was no kind of a rule which they followed, but the technique was evolved with the time, because the more the pieces got damaged, the better ways they had found to kind of repair those cloths. So it might be like 250 years old, 300 years old, but they just carried on maintaining this shawl for generations to generation. And I think that really opened this whole subject of maintenance of a cloth and how it is restored. And when I saw this shawls in the museum collections abroad, I was feeling they are very beautiful, but they were all dead. And in India we have this shawls very much alive, because the rafugas are there to maintain them and to keep them going from generation to generation. And I think because the shawls are there, the rafugas also have work to do to maintain them, because we take them for granted, but it's not just shawls, but from a very ordinary cloth to a very precious cloth. Ordinary could be also very precious for somebody else. And anybody who needs a repair goes to a rafuga. But all this generations and in the history of textile tradition, rafugas were never acknowledged or kind of given importance. So my whole project was kind of making how to make the darners visible. And so in various ways I've tried to do it in the last 10 years.
Yes, so now when you look at refugee, what is it for you? Especially because of your personal understanding of what it means to really mend.
Actually, it is different for different people. Like for some, it could be like a very, very magical kind of an act, where when the rafuga is like rafuga, you give a damaged piece of cloth and he brings it back, and you don't see where the darning is. So it could be like a magic. For some, it could be like a healing process. So it depends on person to person. But because I was researching the textiles on one hand, I was also like researching the work of the rafugas, and I was also going through a journey where it was diagnosed with cancer. Gradually I realized that all these parallel stories were all merging and becoming one for me. So for me, life was like a cloth which had wear and tear, but it needed repair continuously, and that became a metaphor for me.
So we were discussing this, and then suddenly Meenakshi came up and said, there's this Gulzar.
It is really nice, Meenakshi, because I want to also talk about things which are not really old and discarded, which are mended, but also which are on the loop. Can you just recite Gulzar's poem?
मुझको भी तरकीब सिखा ए यार जुलाहे, अक्सर तुझको देखा है कि ताना बुनते, जब कोई तागा टूट गया या ख़त्म हुआ, फिर से बांध के और सिरा कोई जोड़ के उसमें आगे बुनने लगते हो। तेरे इस ताने में लेकिन एक भी गांठ गिरा बुनकर की देख नहीं सकता है कोई। मैंने तो एक बार बुना था एक ही रिश्ता, लेकिन उसकी सारी गिरहें साफ नज़र आती है यार जुलाहे, मुझको भी तरकीब सिखा ए यार जुलाहे।
We were talking about Boro and Fugri. When you look at how they both involve mending, putting pieces together, etc. As Yoshiko mentioned, there's a difference between this. Like the food, I was watching Nadeem working the other day, and it's such fineness, such fineness. It's a very delicate kind of work, and then when you see the cloth also, you have to actually put a shawl against the sun, light, to really see where it is repaired. Otherwise, you don't even make out. So that fineness of work. While Bodo is, can you go to the Yoshiko's slide? They are, it shows, it's visible. Yoshiko, could you, from your understanding these two traditions, how do you look at these two? What are the...
Actually, there are many interesting aspects that I found in Bodo. Of course, what you just said, that those are textiles that are used and worn, totally utilitarian textiles, and people have very little resources. So, in a sense, they had to maintain it as Rafidas maintained Kashmiri shawls, but it's on a different, like day and night. These are everyday work clothes. They lived in this. In olden days, all over the world, most people had such limited materials and clothes to wear. These are actually futon. It's like what you call the mattress in India. So some are for coverlets, like a radai kind of thing. But the bigger one is that, and if you can go over again, because it goes turning, I have to kind of catch up. Mottainai, you saw mottainai, which is a very interesting expression of that. It's too precious, too good for me, too precious to throw away in some cases, or too good for me to have. So there's this sense of valuing what they have and making it go on. And this is in some way a parallel between Kani shawls, because it was living. This was what Priya was seeing, that their textiles, shawls were not there. They were living textiles and maintained by Rafagas. And these were the textiles in a way, in the same way, living, because people had to use them, they had to mend them. In some cases they had to use it for generations. This is the way it was in most countries and most common people.
Isn't that, these are day-to-day, everybody, this is, darning is like the Fugas.
This was just done by ordinary people.
Everyone.
But this, Rafugas were specialized artisans. These were just everyday, anonymous people who used it, mostly women, mother, grandmother, daughter, who would repair these things for children, husband, father, and so forth. And these quilts also are amazing, because in wintertime it's so cold in Japan, in northern areas, that they really valued these quilts. So you can see, we're looking at the back of it, the front of it, and this will be the back. And then if you go next one, you see the front having very little, see this one is the mattress. So you see only the impression of the body weight where the body was pressing. And and 3 panels of narrow bolt. And if you go to the next slide, you see the back side of it, and amazing patches and so forth. Now, these were being collected and shown as an artwork. And because we're seeing this composition and the colors and designs and art.
So this brings us to this question of the artist and the artisan, and also art and the distinctions that we make here. One is like there's this functionality of these things, both these work. But at the same time, when it, as Yoshiko mentioned, it actually at some point it can be taken to the kind of to showcase this as art. So what we had a discussion also, this is a continuation of the discussion we initiated elsewhere. Like we could talk a little bit about this distinction that we often make between the artist and the artisan.
In both cases, between Afghan's work and this kind of folk remending, what is most beautiful, and it kind of speaks to us as a modern contemporary art appreciator, is that these compositions and the work of stitching and so forth are truly just done for a purpose of maintaining the textile. Rafagas do that, and these people, anonymous people, did that. And the selfless work, and also the without ego ridden art statement that often we see in art is totally absent.
Yes.
And it's very refreshing. And it's like appreciating primitive art or outsider art. There's that relationship between this kind of borrow and also some of the Rafagas work. And I think in that, Priya has taken it into a totally different level because herself being an artist and intervening that kind of practice that Rafagas have done, but embracing it and making it as her own expression, which I think is the most exciting thing that I have seen recently as a contemporary art. I think we are going there.
Yes, and another thing about when we think, looking at Priya's work is this, this intervention that Yoshiko is talking about, like very often we make this distinction between art and artisanship, which is very uncomfortable for some of us, to make these kind of categories, and also to put a reason for calling something art. But at the same time, as Yoshiko said, there is a difference that you feel also, like that distinguishes somebody like Priya from, when she is looking at it, there's a certain kind of glance, there's a certain kind of perspective that's coming there, an intervention that's coming there. So if at all we have to move towards I wouldn't say integration, but kind of, if this, we know that some of these living traditions are dying, or they are not acknowledged properly, etc. But in this world, if they have to come forward, if they have to be acknowledged properly, what is it? What do you think from your experience? You've traveled across the world and worked with living.
But I'd like to have Priya's work shown. Do you have that?
Yeah, the next.
So the audience would have a clear idea of what we're talking about. And then maybe Priya can talk about it.
The previous one?
Priya can talk about it.
Yes, Priya can talk about it. 3A?
Last year I was invited for a show, a group show, and I didn't have much work to show, so I was in a fix and didn't know how to go ahead. But there was few months, and then this whole idea of this whole thing about discarding rejected pieces which were woven by me suddenly became very important, because I think it was through my illness I had not worked much, and I realized that I was also sometimes feeling as discarded or rejected at those pieces. So suddenly this whole preciousness of these pieces became very important, and I took them out and reworked on them. And for me, it was actually revealing those defects rather than concealing them, and that became my work, which was transformed and gave a new life to my older works. And so that actually has continued in different ways, where the repair and mending is focused rather than kind of seeing beauty in perfection. Because what I feel that this imperfect cloth, what we see as a perfect cloth is never perfect cloth, because it's an imperfect, where perfection lies in the repair of that piece, which gives you an illusion of a perfect cloth. So for me, it has completely transformed this whole idea of beauty.
So you have the next set of works, and recent works that Priya has done. She's used various methods, like graduating from here, various methods to make the threads visible. We can go to the next set of slides so they can see the slides. Like various methods of making the thread visible. That is her current work, a series of very, very beautiful, beautiful in a different way, works which, you can talk about this.
Yeah, this is like a camo net. Generally it's used to camouflage things, but I use it to kind of reveal. The camo net became something to reveal rather than to hide.
And your paper pulp.
And the paper pulp was also done with the pulp which was used with all the discarded and rejected fabrics. It was recycled and made into paper pulp. And again, with my fabrics, it went back to my work. So it became one with the textiles. So the fabric again is like giving it a new life and recycling the. So the two mediums became one for me.
Are you showing the one with the digital printing? I mean, the printing of
Yeah, I
the.
think there is one here which is kind of a. There were few fragments which were done by the refugees, and then it was digitally printed, and then the threads were removed and again reinserted. One of the slides are there, I think.
And you're having a show in your home? Is that already?
It's very curious. Like we started this journey, and Priya can talk about this. This one.
This is so what actually is last few years of my life I have been quite confined to the house because of my own situation, but all this work has emerged out of my surroundings, and so when we wanted to document it, it was Samuel who came to take photographs, and different corners of the house was used to photograph them, and then we came to a kind of idea of having a show in the house itself. So that is the future plans, to have a show.
This is also because it is very important for us also, LILA. Working with Priya, we've realized that it is very important for us to understand art not in gallery spaces but in the living space of the artist. So Priya's home inspired us to think about ways of making the artist's home an open studio and bring people there, so that there is a total experience of being with an artist. So we will open this very soon, and it is also part of a larger project that we are working with Priya, which we will announce. Would you like to also comment on this a bit?
Well, actually, your work really needs to be examined close and in person. They look so much more real, of course, and intimate and engaging. It's just the script projection doesn't do justice to them, but I think they're very, very exciting. And also, can we move on to the sustainability? We are also discussing how textile continues to live. And this was the realization Priya shared with me, how Kani shawls were really evolving all the time. And she was also, I accompanied some of your research trips to the museums in America, USA, with your family. And she was thinking about introducing the Rafuga work to the museum conservation department, where conservators were really very neurotic about using technology and certain protocols. And I think, if I'm right, I'm not good at numbers, but something like they were saying to repair this, conserve this shawl, it'll cost 60,000 US dollars or something. And then,
in museum situation, when the textiles come to the museum, after that they are not touched till they are displayed for some show. So there are hundreds and thousands of Indian textiles all over the world which are in need of repair. And my dream is actually to connect all the Indian darners, which are also in hundreds and thousands, to all these Indian textiles all over the world, so they can be kind of restored, because outside the country there are no possible ways to do it, because either it is too expensive or the skills are not there. But this whole idea of kind of either the Rafugas go and travel to all these public and private collections to repair them, or the shawls come to India, is a big question mark.
but I think that was, because you mentioned the one reason that was great to visit these museums and collections in the United States is because when they were accessioned, it was stopped, like there was no Rafuga work.
Yeah.
So you could really study.
The studies which I did was almost 100 years, going back 100 years back, because they were actually frozen in time. So it was textiles maybe like 1890s or 1880s when they were acquired by the museums. And what I really kind of, it was also insight to know that with the time, the Rafuga work has actually improved and evolved. The more the textiles are getting deteriorated, there is a challenge for the Rafugas to make it much more like kind of a complete. And so the older the textiles, the more is when we are talking about other traditions, we see that they are dying, but I think there's a big hope for the Rafugas to work on this textiles, because they actually is a big challenge, because in last several decades the Rafugas now are not only repairing Kani shawls or handlooms, but also machine-made cloth or jacquard cloth, and hand is still working over the machines to repair them. So I think there is a hope in the Rafuga's work in future.
So we were talking about sustainability because that's something I'm interested in. Sustaining textile, and at the same time sustaining a tradition of the skills and artistry all over the world. This is a very big issue. And I have wrote, if anyone is interested, I have produced 3 films with Michelle Garcia for natural dyeing, totally sustainable way, because in olden days they were using nothing but natural dyes and in nothing but sustainable ways, less harmful to the dyers and the environment. So we're looking at much larger issues through what we're doing about the sustainability. And I think they're educating people. And also I have made a documentation of the shibori artisans, which I am known for, which is Bandani and Nahari and the compression resist. And that also is facing a very big challenge, not like replicas, but the market has shrunk all over the world. People are not wearing kimono anymore. So then how can they adapt to the new market, new products to develop, so they can sustain their work? But there, designers and artists and also consumers has to be educated in order to sustain our heritage and a global continuation of our life in a holistic way.
I think we are coming to an understanding that when we are talking about healing and mending is not just required for the clothes, but mending is required. I mean, it is actually needed in the community of refugees, like in the way we are developing the development models that we have. Those require mending. So I think this evening is giving us an understanding of mending itself as a larger metaphor.
Okay.
Which
may I say
yes.
one thing? Because I'm about 3/4 way in this book of Boro, and this has given me a very different way to look at beauty and the value. I'm not just talking about textile, and I'm hoping the book in the end will introduce those two areas, a new perception. And it's like when wabi-sabi was introduced or shibui was introduced. By the way, they were not embraced in a proper perception or definition. For Japanese, we don't agree with the way that they were defined in Western cultures. So anyways, in this book of Boro, I'm seeing why are we looking at something that was a castaway, worthless. As a Japanese, we feel ashamed of showing these things because it shows how limited resources are and so forth. But people are responding to it as an art, as something that's important to them. So what changes, what makes that castaway rags and trash, waste, into art? And so this is really perception of beauty. And I have been reading a few books which I like. And Yanagi Soetsu, who wrote The Unknown Craftsman, that started Mingyue movement. It's like Tagore, who influenced our psyche because Japanese didn't embrace this folk art as art at all. They were called getemono. They were just common people using every day. They were not art. And also Suzuki Daisetsu, who wrote about Zen. And it leads to me to think that, leads to the area of Buddhist thinking, where Suzuki Daisetsu talked about the beauty, where the true beauty, he talked about this in the discussion of this called Dharma Gate of Beauty, I think. And he said that true beauty exists where beauty and ugliness weren't separated. So when human embraced black and white, right and wrong, beauty and ugliness, it helped us to think things in a logical way. It helps us to evolve in certain ways, but we lost a great deal. And so this is something that I'm visiting through these folk mending of useless and valueless textiles.
While we are talking about this, it's interesting that we brought a lot of traditions into this discussion. So there are perspectives, like various ways of looking at this, like how to bring this beauty in our midst. How even this evening is our concern was just how to bring beauty into the midst of a conversation like this. So we again go back to Meenakshi and Paresh to close this evening with some music and dance.
सो चादर सुर नर मुनि ओढ़े ओढ़ के मैली कीनी चदरिया दास कबीर जतन से ओढ़े चदरिया सो चादर सुर नर मुनि ओढ़े ओढ़े सो चादर सुर नर मुनि ओढ़ के मैली कीनी चदरिया जीनी जीनी बीनी चदरिया जीनी जीनी दास कबीरा जतन से ओढ़े दास कबीरा जतन से ओढ़े ज्यों की त्यों धर दीनी चदरिया जीनी जीनी बीनी चदरिया जीनी जीनी बीनी चदरिया जीनी 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 चदरिया जीनी जीनी चदरिया जीनी 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 चदरिया
Open this for discussion, like if you have questions to ask Yoshiko and Priya, or comments to make.
Can I just add one more thing that I add is that so this beauty before true beauty lies before beauty and air beauty were even separated. So at the same time, Yanagi and Suzuki talked about the ourselves, human being, free from all judgment. That we don't make judgment, because if there's right and wrong, we have to make a judgment. Or free from all impediments. And I think that's something that seeing Priya working on this Rakuta project in fighting her illness, I see her spirit, and I'm just tearing up because she is doing that. She's just incredible spirit. And I admire her so much.
This is actually the feeling that all of us, since the day we met Priya, also, we've been with her, and this is exactly the same feeling that we have about Priya. And as Yoshiko said, it's incredible, like the way she thinks and makes this whole new world now. is really, we hope to bring this to more and more people in the coming days. If you have some questions or comments, please let us have that quickly, and I will close this evening. Yeah, please.
No, it's a very simple idea which all of you have already explored, but just to emphasize it, the fact that the coming together of so many strands of the warp and the weft, and the compiling, the collaging in all traditions, not just in India, anywhere, is actually also the enlivening of memories, and the fact that you're stitching memories together. And these memories are memories of togetherness. And in that sense as well, a lesson within this, not just a lesson, but a sense of emotion in it, which is in your borrow, which is very important part of the fact that it belonged to your great-great-great-grandmother, and it is still surviving today, and you are wearing it. So, you know, that whole connection and memory and context becomes so much more familiar and so much more intimate.
I think textile is one of the most intimate material culture we can study. We feel very lucky to be involved in it because we are born wrapped in cloth, die wrapped in shroud, and clothes identify us, and we live with cloth. And looking at historical textiles of high Kashmiri shawl, Kani shawl, to very low class rags, we read people's lives and values and work, and it's like reading books.
Also, it is the most fragile.
At the same time, it's very sustaining, strong. Yes.
It stays. That's it.
Hello, yeah. I have got actually two questions to our guest from Japan. One is, you talked about Tagore's contribution, but you know, when it comes to painting, the Tagore's family, Abanindranath Tagore and Gaganendranath Tagore, they also kind of tried to create an indigenous form of painting as well. You know, like wash tempera, gouache, and they tried to give, also revitalize certain portion of our, you know, Buddhist era, you know, painting. But if you come to our contemporary context, what is very unfortunate, and why I'm talking about this in particular to you, is like this kind of indigenous textile-based forms lack certain kind of contemporaneity in our contemporary Indian art scene, with which I have some little acquaintance. So, do you think that in Japan there is some contemporary painting that is also coming out of this textile tradition? And is there any way that, you know, people who are coming out of Shantiniketan mainly, even today, they can be integrated with that contemporary language, which we completely lack in our modern, contemporary art scene? If my question is clear.
I'm not sure if I got totally, if I understood totally what you're asking, but if you were to say that this kind of work, are you asking this kind of work can exist now, or?
No, I mean, I'll just try to again explain you very quickly. It's like when our freedom movement was at its peak, Shantiniketan tried to redefine Indian tradition of art. And one of the most milestone of that tradition was Haripura Congress that happened. The banner itself was made by Nandalal Bose, and there they tried to imbibe the techniques and tradition which are not from European tradition as a cultural response. But when you look at certain works of Abanindranath Tagore and Gaganendranath Tagore, who were related to Arvind Tagore's family, they tried to create a new tradition. But that voice means that form itself got lost just immediately after the independence movement. But in Japan, do you have any contemporary painting that is based, and is there a contemporary language? Because people who are working today in India on silk, on such textile material, they lack kind of a contemporaneity.
I see what you're saying. No, in Japan, I think in Asian countries, including India as well, I think, but particularly in Japan, there hasn't been really clear distinction between art and craft. This is very Eurocentric idea. And also like textile was a lesser art just because people wore them. That's very Eurocentric. And sculpture, which is non-functional, is considered a prime contemporary art expression. I think that's very Eurocentric again. And so in Japan, craft is very much respected. And there are many very well-established and famous national living treasures and artists who are using contemporary language. Yet there are certain protocols, certain framework that they work within, because they would do that in kimono form or screens and so forth. But that doesn't mean that they're not speaking contemporary language. And they were very much respected, and they're not considered craftsmen. You know, they're artists. So I myself studied in Kyoto and in textile, and actually the funny thing was that in their mind, there are certain textile techniques which are acceptable as an artistic expression, namely yuzen, which is rice-based and resist dyeing with painting, and katazome, which is a stencil dyeing with paste resist, and Japanese wax resist, which is an amazing form of visual expression on the fabric. But when I was in school, in art school in Kyoto, we were never taught or even taken to an artisan's workshop of shibori. We never learned shibori. We never learned ikai, because these traditional processes take so much different artisan, who dyes, who ties, who does this and that, and it is very difficult to create a singular artistic signature piece, maybe. But I do recognize certain hierarchy and discrimination against certain technique, certain crafts versus another craft. But still, there are some amazing shibori artists. And that's one of the subjects I was very interested in, shibori and kasuri, which is a ikai, compression resist. But to look at these two things as a compression resist and in shaping, transformation of dimension of material is a contemporary idea coming out of myself as an artist, seeing bandhani as a dimensional transformation, because in bandhani or laharia, you always transform two-dimensional pliable plane, which is fabric, into three-dimensional shape, however you do it, and then compress it during the dyeing, which leaves the marks. And the resisted areas are exactly the memory of the process and how artisan interacted with the cloth in the process. And the design in the end is an incredible record of all that process and material. That's the beauty of it. And then contemporary artist has to take it up to a different level, as Priya has done with Rahula.
Is there anything else, like maybe the last comment or question? Yes. All right. So thank you very much for this evening. Thank you, Priya and Parash. and everyone who is here. This is a very beautiful moment for us at LILA to bring these, all these people together, like with the donors here and the doctors here and the healers here. So it's really a wonderful experience of togetherness for us. Thank you very much for being here, and we hope to bring such events again to you. Please be with us, and on the 7th of, the day after, we are launching a new philosophical banner for philosophy and reflective thinking on LILA Menso in collaboration with South Asian University and an Indo-European thinking forum called FIND at South Asian University, 6:30, 7 o'clock. The 7th of March. It's thinking about LILA, play. An economist, a dancer, and a philosopher are thinking about this idea of play. Please be there. Thank you very much. Good night.